Chapter 13, Fry the Brain, The Descent into Madness. Sarajevo is a beautiful city built centuries ago by the once powerful Ottoman Empire. Even after the Ottomans collapsed, the city remained and thrived with a vibrant, tolerant, multi-ethnic, multi-religious population that included Muslims, Jews, Croats, and Serbs. Sarajevo, located in the heart of Bosnia, was a true cultural kaleidoscope where East met West and merged into something that was a little bit of both. In 1984, when the Winter Olympics were held in Sarajevo, the world saw firsthand the city's beauty. Its handcrafted churches and mosques, the colorful orange roofs of its quaint residences, and the beautiful snow-capped mountains. If, during these splendid Olympics, you approached a resident of Sarajevo and said 8 years later they would wake every morning to the echo of gunshots, they would have called you crazy. Even fewer people in 1986 would have predicted Mikhail Gorbachev's policies of glasnost, political openness, and perestroika, economic restructuring, would lead to genocide in the ethnic and religious patchwork called Yugoslavia. However, Gorbachev's attempt to make the Soviet Union stronger economically and less threatening politically led to an explosion of nationalism that burst across East European like a hand grenade. Only 3 years later, in 1989, the Kremlin rejected the Brezhnev Doctrine, meaning Russia would no longer interfere in the internal political affairs of its Warsaw Pact satellites. This begged a most serious question. If the regimes of the old Iron Curtain no longer had Moscow's support, what was to stop the local populations from throwing their repressive communist governments into the dustbin of history? The powder keg was lit. Soon, an irresistible revolutionary wave crashed down on the Soviet Union's former allies, bringing down government after government in country after country, like dominoes. East Germany, Poland, and Czechoslovakia all rejected their communist systems. Yugoslavia, too, was hit by this wave as its own states vied for independence from the Serb-dominated, Belgrade-centered government. On June 25, 1991, Yugoslavia's westernmost territory, Slovenia, rolled the military and political dice and declared its independence from Belgrade. After a brief 10-day war with very few casualties, Slovenia was free. The quick road to nationhood was due mostly to the fact few Serbs lived in Slovenia. Serbia's leader, Slobodan Milosevic, calculated he could not muster the support to fight a civil war where there was no Serbs to protect. To Slovenia's neighbor, Croatia, the road to independence appeared easy, almost costless. A dangerous precedent had been set because Croatia, too, thirsted for independence. On June 25th, Croatia also declared its independence. However, unlike Slovenia, Croatia agreed to defer their independence. It would be several months before Serbs and Croats started killing each other with gusto. But by the end of 1991, the war was in full swing as Croatia found itself locked in brutal fighting against its minority Serb population, which was backed by Belgrade and its army, the JNA. The fighting between Croatia and the Serbs echoed loudly throughout the rest of former Yugoslavia and into neighboring Bosnia-Herzegovina. Bosnia-Herzegovina, a mishmash of Catholic Croats, Orthodox Serbs, and Muslim Bosnians, quickly disintegrated when its Croatian and Serbian minorities declared their own sub-states. Full-blown war finally came to Bosnia-Herzegovina after it declared independence from Belgrade in March 1992. The stage for the siege of Sarajevo was set. The Serbian siege of Sarajevo. The Bosnian government tried to navigate the perilous road to independence while avoiding a crippling war and failed. Because, as the Bosnian government performed their delicate political balancing act, the Bosnian Serbs were moving in weapons, heavy artillery, and supplies. When Bosnia-Herzegovina declared its independence, the Bosnian Serb Army, BSA, was ready, attacking along a broad front, gobbling up tracts of territory as they cleansed the country of Muslims. The capital of Bosnia-Herzegovina, Sarajevo, was caught up in the cyclone of war when the BSA tried to overrun it in a tank-led assault. The Sarajevans found themselves unprepared, caught in a war they did not want, with few supplies, few heavy weapons, and nothing more than undisciplined gaggles of hastily raised militia for protection. But this proved to be enough because Sarajevo's complex urban terrain lent itself to the defense. The Serbian assault was stopped cold. What began as a lightning attack to steamroll the capital of Bosnia-Herzegovina ground to a sudden standstill and was transformed into the longest siege in modern military history. With the surrounding BSA forces were well armed with heavy artillery, mortars, and tanks, they had relatively weak infantry forces. They had only 13,000 troops committed to the siege. In contrast, the Bosnian forces trapped in the cities, while suffering from a lack of heavy weapons, had 30,000 soldiers, militiamen, and volunteers under arms. It was this superiority in foot soldiers that proved to be the trump card. Both sides eventually realized infantry was the key factor in their urban combat, and the Bosnians, with more boots on the ground, were able to hold off the fire-powered dependent Serbs in spite of their own dearth of weapons. Since the Serbs could not storm Sarajevo by force, they settled for surrounding the city, where the entrapped population would be brought to its collective knees the old-fashioned way, through starvation, hardship, and terror. This was a strategy the Serbs referred to as fry the brain, where the people of Sarajevo would be hammered incessantly with such a stupefying stream of endless terror and random death they would stop thinking rationally, stop defending their city, and just give up the Serbs' demands. From April 1992 until February 1996, the Dayton Peace Accords were signed in December 1995, but the Serbs only pulled out several months later. The people of Sarajevo suffered from a murderous barrage of high-explosive shells fired from Serbian artillery, rockets, mortars, and tanks. Almost every building in the city suffered some degree of damage, and thousands of structures were completely destroyed. By the end of the siege, almost 40% of Sarajevo's pre-war population of 500,000 people were killed, ethnically cleansed, or fled in terror. As in other urban wars, the Serbian forces found the sniper could play a vital role in their plans. The Serbian Sniper Campaign. Saying the Serbs value the urban sniper is a gross understatement and does not do the Serbian sniper effort justice. A more accurate statement would be from 1992 to 1996, Serbian forces embarked on the longest sustained urban sniping campaign in the history of warfare. For 1,395 days, Serbian forces directed a deliberate campaign of terror against the Sarajevans of all walks of life. Serbian sniper policy dictated their snipers shoot anything that moved, military or civilian, men or women, children or adults. To be a Sarajevan was to be marked for death. The Serb sniper campaign served several purposes. First, the random killing of everyone and anyone sought to disrupt daily life in Sarajevo. No one was safe from the Serbian shooters, and anyone could find themselves under fire from an unseen gunman hidden skillfully in one of the surrounding picturesque neighborhoods. The Serbian snipers hoped to cause utter chaos in the city, making the Bosnian government's attempts to defend the city impossible. Governing Sarajevo was indeed difficult, since public employees were often the first ones to take a bullet, policemen could not openly walk the streets, public transportation was paralyzed, and firemen were shot as they tried to put out fires. The garbage piled up because the sanitation workers were picked off. Serbian snipers even gunned down Sarajevo's zookeepers. The Serbs' goal was to instill widespread public terror, i.e., to fry the brain. Since the majority of Sarajevans trapped in the city were non-Serbs, the attacking Serbs also used their sniper campaign as an ethnic cleansing tool. The Serbs calculated large numbers of fearful non-Serbian refugees would be inclined to evacuate the city rather than stay and be shot or blown up. Even though Sarajevo was besieged, people still managed to smuggle or bribe themselves out of the Serbian ring or get flown out by the United Nations forces securing Sarajevo's airport. As an added bonus, any non-Serb killed from the barrel of a Serbian rifle served to reduce the population of rival ethnic groups. Either way, a reduction of the non-Serb populace through death or forced migration was a step in the right direction for the attacking Serbs. Judging by the 100,000-plus civilians that fled Sarajevo, the Serbs' calculations were partially correct. Furthermore, the Serbs used their sniper campaign as a means to pressure the government of Bosnia-Herzegovina into meeting their political demands. In this case, the tortured city of Sarajevo was held hostage by the encircling Serbs. Every day the Serbs picked off more and more of the hard-pressed Sarajevans, the Bosnian government could blame themselves for the carnage. If the Bosnian government wanted to stop the butchery, all they had to do was surrender and the killing would stop. Additionally, if the Sarajevans wanted to come to their senses and save themselves from further bloodshed, all they had to do was pressure their own government into giving up. The Serbs were saying, "See, it's not our fault we are shooting you. It's your fault we are shooting you." Sniper's Alley. One of the city's prime killing fields, and where one's brain may get fried, was the east-west running main boulevard in downtown Sarajevo, dubbed Sniper's Alley by its residents. This boulevard had wide, two-way streets and connected the newer industrial portion of the city with the older historic section. The southern edge of the boulevard was widened further by the tram tracks used before the siege for public transportation. Sniper's Alley became even more exposed after Sarajevans, who were desperate for firewood in the cold winter months, cut down the surrounding trees. Another open area, the ancient waters of the Miljacka River, bordered Sniper's Alley to the south, just a pistol shot away. It was from the far side of the Miljacka that the Serbian snipers had scores of excellent urban sniper positions to shoot from, including towering concrete multi-story apartment buildings. Although Sarajevans quickly learned to avoid unnecessary movement along Sniper's Alley, risks still had to be taken to get food, water, and wood. For example, during most of the siege, one of the few sources of potable water was located near Sniper's Alley. People had to drink water to live, and to get this life-sustaining liquid, they had to run a gauntlet under the gaze of waiting Serbian snipers. Also, people and soldiers had to regularly cross Sniper's Alley to get to the southern parts of the city, still under Bosnian control. Even though north-south movement in the city was possible, the Serbian snipers tried hard to cut the city into northern and southern halves by focusing their efforts on Sniper's Alley. Appropriately, the battle for Sarajevo began with a sniper attack along Sniper's Alley. The day was April 6, 1992, and thousands of Sarajevans gathered on the main boulevard outside the Parliament building to demonstrate for peace. Across the street, i.e. Sniper's Alley, just north of Parliament, was the Holiday Inn, a bright yellow building that became a famous landmark and reference point to all Sarajevans during the siege. In early April, the Holiday Inn was controlled by Serbs, as it was the headquarters of the Serbian Democratic Party. While the crowd congregated on the streets in front of Parliament, hidden Serb snipers opened fire from the yellow Holiday Inn, wounding at least a dozen people. In response, the enraged crowd rushed the Holiday Inn, swarmed inside, and captured 3 people. One of those arrested was reported to be a bodyguard for a Serbian official. The bodyguard was found hiding in the cellar of the Holiday Inn, armed with a sniper rifle. From that day on, the Holiday Inn was controlled by the Bosnian security forces and ceased to be a roost for Serbian snipers. As the war progressed, award-winning war correspondent Peter Maas saw that the Yellow Holiday Inn became a favorite target for Serbian snipers, almost as if to say, "You want the hotel, you can have it, and you can die in it." The Serbs no longer occupied the hotel, but they still shot at it. One day in March 1993, a Serbian sniper positioned west of the city fired an anti-aircraft gun at the people passing by the hotel. At the same time, other Serbian snipers fired from the eastern end of the city, targeting the Hotel Mas. Estimated the sniper with the anti-aircraft weapon fired 50 shots a day. At the time of his report, the snipers altogether were firing a shot every 30 seconds. Eventually, one of the snipers hit a man caught in the open. As the victim screamed in pain, nearby bystanders sprinted from cover and dragged the wounded man to safety. Then a car drove up and took the bleeding man to the nearby hospital, which was only a few blocks away. Soon after, the stricken man was hauled away. 2 unsuspecting girls were also targeted as they walked by the hotel. After hearing a bullet was by them, they dove to the ground and crawled through the mud to safety before they took off running zigzag to a safer location. Not everyone was so lucky as to be merely wounded or to have to crawl through the mud to get away. Dinina Sokolovic lived with her family in Sarajevo, where they were virtual prisoners in their own home because anyone who went outside was targeted by Serbian snipers. However, on November 18, 1994, a temporary ceasefire was in effect, and United Nations forces were present to enforce it. On that cold November day, Diana and her 7-year-old son, Nermin, took advantage of the lull in the shooting to go outside and find some firewood to heat their frigid home. As the two walked by a UN vehicle on their way home, a Serbian sniper picked them up in their scope. A single shot rang out, and a bullet blew through Diana's stomach and plowed into Nerman's head. The young boy died face down on the icy pavement in a pool of his own spreading blood in front of a UN armored personnel carrier. This was the reality of the Serb sniper policy. This was the policy of Fry the Brain. The anonymous killers. The men who blew the brains out of 7-year-old boys did so from the security of the Serbian lines. These faceless killers lived in homes confiscated from non-Serbs and led relatively comfortable lives. Their homes had food, water, firewood, and electricity. While the Sarajevans sprinted for their lives, the Serbian snipers who surrounded Sarajevo day and night silently scanned the neighborhoods for their next prey. Since the Serbian snipers operated in relative safety, they could operate overtly. True, the Serbs had to be aware of the Bosnians' own snipers, but the Serbs still wore their uniforms openly as they went about their daily work. Sarajevans had little hope of finding out by name who the Serbian snipers that killed and maimed them. The Serbian military leadership certainly would not reveal who their snipers were and what areas of the city they targeted. Since numerous Serbian snipers overlapped one another, covering the same area of the city, only the individual sniper knew who they shot. For example, if 3 different snipers in 3 different locations targeted a man through the park behind the Yellow Holiday Inn, only the man pulling the trigger knew who made the shot. The sniper who actually shot the unarmed civilian could always deny their role in the shooting, since one of the other snipers could have done it as well. Multiple hidden snipers firing at the same area of the city provided the shooters with plausible deniability, making subsequent prosecution almost impossible. While the majority of the Serbian snipers remained anonymous, some of the Sarajevans saw these killers up close. This close contact with their executioners happened whenever the Bosnian Serb army recruited into their ranks other Bosnian Serbs who were from Sarajevo. These local recruits were a windfall to the BSA because they knew the city and the urban terrain like the back of their hands, and most importantly, they knew the people. But the Sarajevan snipers working on the Serbian side were not killing strangers, they were killing their own neighbors. For this reason, a Serbian sniper who was from Sarajevo and still lived in their own neighborhood had to be careful. In fact, they had to operate like a guerrilla if they were to successfully conceal their crimes. Journalist Michael Montgomery wrote about such an instance where his Serbian friend, Predrag Bundalo, worked as a sniper during the day but lived in his Sarajevo neighborhood of Orbavica at night. Grbavica, strategically located in south-central Sarajevo, bordered the south edge of the Miljacka River. Unlike the rest of Sarajevo, Bravica was captured by surging Serbian forces in early 1992 at the beginning of the siege. What followed in the wake of the Serbian occupation of Grbavica was a particularly distasteful example of ethnic cleansing. In Bravica, all the non-Serbs, to include old men, women, and children, were evicted from their homes, held as hostages, arbitrarily beaten, robbed, humiliated in every way possible, and executed at will. According to Human Rights Watch, the population of pre-war Bavica was 31,000. After the brutal occupation of various Serb paramilitary groups, the post-war population was only 2,000. Predrag was truly a product of the new cleansed Grbavica. He initially scoffed at fighting his fellow Sarajevans, but when a Serbian soldier stuck a gun in his face and ordered him to fight or die, he made the obvious choice to fight. The people of Grbavica, just like Predrag, became polarized in the ethnic-religious war forced on them. There were no gray areas. Either you fought for the Serbs or you were an enemy of the Serbs. There was no in-between. Rumor said Predrag took up arms as ordered and manned the front lines of Grbavica in an apartment building hovering high over the Miljacka River. From this tall, drab, concrete apartment building across from the Yellow Holiday Inn, Predrag and his fellow Serbs had an excellent view of Sniper's Alley. However, Predrag did more than just man an outpost with his AK-47. He volunteered to become a sniper. Predrag's motivation for his new trade came after a Bosnian sniper shot and killed his close friend, who was a fellow Serb soldier, right in front of him. Afterwards, Predrag secured an old M48 rifle, which is a Yugoslavian copy of the famous German Mauser K98, and mounted a scope on it. Predrag, the reluctant soldier, died alongside his friend. The new Predrag, armed with his accurate sniper, began shooting across the Miljacka River with precision, killing his fellow Sarajevans. Along with this killing came a heavy drinking habit. The repeated up-close killing of innocent people weighed so heavily on Predrag's mind he could only ease the burden through a painkiller, alcohol. Predrag was frying his own brain. After Predrag spent some time targeting Sarajevans across the Miljacka, he bragged to his own brother he already killed 50 people. A post-war investigation revealed Predrag was probably telling the truth, since his favorite sniper position was across from a neighborhood where scores of innocent people were killed by sniper fire during the siege. When the ugly siege of Sarajevo finally ended, the Bosnian War Crimes Commission investigated Predrag as a suspected war criminal. As fate would have it, the head of the War Crimes Commission, as a Muslim lawyer who used to live in Predrag's own apartment building, but Predrag would never be sentenced for his crimes. In May 1993, as Predrag sat in a friend's apartment, he was shot point blank in the head, execution style. Predrag's death was ruled a suicide, as no witnesses or potential suspects were ever named. The truth was, many people wanted Predrag dead. Ironically, some of Predrag's fellow Serbs thought he helped his Muslim neighbors too much. The local Muslims, who suffered under the Serbian jackboot and witnessed Predrag's own violent outbursts against them, also wanted him dead. In Sarajevo's new polarized society, Predrag was caught in the middle, and the middle was a dangerous place to be. Even the Serbian military may have wanted Predrag dead. As a freelance sniper killing unarmed civilians, Predrag was certainly carrying out an explicit Serbian policy of terror. However, since Predrag lived among the remnants of the Grbavica populace and ran his morn in bouts of drinking, his neighbors knew that he was what he was doing. Predrag had lost his anonymity. Many people on both sides knew Predrag was a mass murderer. As a result, the Serb paramilitaries may have killed Predrag themselves just to shut his morn. After all, the Serbs wanted to get away with their atrocities. They did not want to announce them publicly. The hard-drinking, violent, uncontrollable Predrag was a walking billboard for war crimes. With a bullet in Predrag's head, the Serbs' crimes were buried a little deeper, but not too deep.